Hello, America, world. At Tucker Carlson's campus and next to it are a bunch of people from Weathersfield who have roles with untimely death at the campus, even if it was made up. They have roles with various natures of predicate acts. They're next to it. There's an officer who uses the name Darth Vader over the phone who's involved with interbranch forging, fabricating transcripts with FBI Director Luskin and people involved with syntax with the other countries that we share relationships with, including Russia, Ukraine, um, Saudi Arabia, before and after the World Trade Center attack, Afghanistan. They have collusion slash S with a bunch of people at Weathersfield campuses who have been acting with former director of the FBI and others, and courts family members who have been planting identity theft, fraud, slanders, and collusion slash S with predicate acts methods at campuses, incapable of defending that and pretending other offensively, as shown needs to by them, by a breaching method to them, and affording discerned what our founders left declassified to have discerned for ourselves. These are people involved with the Leahy family and a Lombardo family and others with the triage at Hartford Hospital and with triages across the country. There are many people tied to a Jennifer Kanapicki and to a Paul Abted and his family. Their roles with triages across the country, foreign and domestic. They have overt criminal enterprises and private ones involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them. Facebook with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with federal evidence crimes in New Britain Superior Court. Weathersfield Police, their Facebook pages, the people who post on it. There are people with the name Joshua Julian, Joshua Stryker, and a Joshua Schumack, and intelligence families tied to them, like named Violet, and their roles at Hartford Hospital, with lawyers with the hospital, military with the hospital, doctors, ones with badges, ones with gavels. They have judges, their family members involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, changing, faking, hiding, obfuscating digital evidences, including to Judge Napolitano. You guys should not have done that. They have a bunch of people tied to some Mendez police who attached me to fake conversations with them at the Weathersfield police station when I was a kid and now as an adult. These are also some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme. They're not just stupid when they're countering. Tucker Carlson, you can't be that stupid. No, I'm not calling you stupid. You're smarter than me in many ways, but I'm trying to say. In other words, affirmative action. You're wondering why they're countering affirmative action. Look at the jobs supplied to the people in the background of and those inside those buildings in the background of rap videos, or just either suburbs were designed by a torture, fact sheet nature, extortion, and slavery method that had been in place, which our founders and, and through James Madison, they left this declassified 45 for us to understand and why and how not to defend anyone else's name as our founder. And to understand that there were plural founders, because that's what they did. They counter-extorted the rest of the founders. They forced them to take part of the Declaration of Independence because it was against the law slash S. There was even roles with trade. There were even roles with slavery only allowed. They still have other things, others ourselves blamed for that. Otherwise, that body is sensed and it is adapted to, including if it is a majority of people, including if it is everyone. You guys can't afford to have, and you have these slogans as presidents for presidents. You guys are child abused at country campuses A through Z, the differences of it. So people involved with the Ray Colo and people with the name Oliveri and a Joshua Stryker, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by some girl who planted evidences with them years apart at campuses. They're putting fake things in databases and with their educators. Increasingly, an Oliveri family has identity theft. I never tried to seek him out once. They sought me out to make confessions because they've been making confessions to the breaching method. A whole bunch of other countries are involved with them. I don't know the Eric Olson and Matt Olson. They try to take a picture to pretend other with my educator involved with some body dumping spots years apart, and untimely deaths years apart. People involved with their educators and people with the intelligence community and the military at Central Connecticut State University, also next to Trinity College, also involved with nice people on two-hour highway where it runs into Hangdog Lane, and the conjunctions to that and to that, like Route 3. And conjunctions to that is the state judicial branch offices and the Berlin Turnpike before the heart of Hartford. A bunch of people on with Hangdog Lane where it runs into two-hour highway and conjunctions to it have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and federal evidences crimes with that location tied to the three spots at the end of the Berlin Turnpike, where these are people who were raised where the only three branches of government and the intelligence tied to them at countries A through Z. They're raised criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw, and used remotely as all ages and natures of investigations and investigators, as is one of the things that is hyper invisible but still discernible, hyper evidentially discernible relative to black pupils, whites of eyes. How and why really? It is recorded that other has been communicated about what our founders communicated about how the breaching method reassigned what nature communicates with black pupils, whites of eyes, and the natures of jobs that we have to get rid of too. Let them, oh, that's opinion. You guys can't afford to have what's discerned. WFSB, CBS News has roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake conversations with me. They have the FBI, people from Saudi Arabia. I don't even know my name. I don't know their name. Involved with them. And people at the state capitol in Hartford, Connecticut, and next to it, with foreign and domestic military through time, involved intercities with WFSB and their intelligence and names next to their sense and sensibilities. You guys have audacity to be able to attend to speak for peace or for crimes. You guys have better get the heck on paper and stop making it worse with your little interbranch fakes. Too, forging and switching names. Get the heck on paper and prepare to address the fake transcripts. And the FBI director, Robert Luskin, with a whole bunch of other countries and federal criminals, including some as his co-defendants in a 2006 district court case, increasingly collusion /S with names at next to networks like Fox Connecticut News, WFSB, and WTNH has their sources too, all along Route 175 and Main Street, which connects to it from the founding location /S and conjunctions and next to it. Roles with federal evidences crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, timing where people are going to go to try to make fake exceptions. Increasingly, people that totally fake exceptions, like a Joshua Julian, too. All these campuses, like UConn, campus I didn't even go to, UConn and Quinnipiac University, have all kinds of organized crimes, roles with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, and relative delusions. There are tactical delusions that would not have been in place unless it was being exploited, as I recorded, being and have been exploited. There are names on Valleycrest Street, where I went to a kindergarten class there for 1 year. Increasingly, there's a Harris family involved with medical and sexual offenders, foreign and domestic, involved also with the manipulation of the daughter of a principal at a campus I went to, with ones involved also with the proven principal child abuser at that campus, and with more malls and shopping centers roles with the differences of guilt too. Even when they catch real criminals, those prisons had roles with those criminals before they were caught, and they've been using the prison to keep their mouth shut about what actually the value of their roles with the body dumping spot reported of the serial killer involved with the Sandy Hook prison. You write through administrations, they have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and precedents regarding, in other words, statute of limitations, for example. They have ongoing predicate acts of facts, methods, and audacity to pretend this is about past. These are ongoing things. You better get me off the fake conversations with this Mendez police officer that forced my Saudi ex to collusions with him at the Wethersfield police station, with the FBI director too, Robert Luskin, a bunch of ways, directly and indirectly, involved intercities with child abusers, sexual and medical offenders of kids, and roles that a Mendez family has. With retired police chiefs, too, with the same house near me. Never saw him on my street in my life. Get me off fake conversation. I never had a word of conversation in my life with the older Mendez police brother. In other words. And they have a multiple retired police chiefs and detectives like one named Dylan and increasingly involved planting evidence on all sides of my house. There, a whole bunch. There's switching names, forging names, made confessions on Facebook, confirmed things were confirmed to me on Facebook as people like Eric or no Enzo Fienza and his cousin and people associated with them with the intelligence community and next to the judicial branch offices involved with federal evidences crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and roles within foreign and domestic intelligence with mayors, fire departments, involved how they're kept criminally foreign influence, how they hide live progressions is also recorded too. Other locations slash S. All sides in criminal and civil cases are being and haven't been used remotely at the same time with the interbranch and intelligence tied to them, putting the same self-valued sequence shifts and others just fake transcripts for them, fake ties and conversations for them, and the news at the same time, including regarding the World Trade Center attack. Connecticut had roles with it. And then further hyper additionally with the judicial branch and the corrections offices, as they're actually involved with this, and conjunctions to them and to that. All with ties with a whole bunch of people tied to the same house slash S, involved with police confessions over the phone too. But they also fake phone transcripts hiding it. FBI has all kinds of collusions with New Britain Superior Court, the Connecticut District Court, and the Harper courts with digital crimes, including with a Dean Judd and his kids involved before and after the World Trade Center attack, including with people involved with and as co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, some of his co-defendants and their family members and their lawyer, Robert Chevrolet. They have collusion slash S before the World Trade Center attack and after it with West Hartford locations, syntax, and their roles with officers in courts, switching and forging names to cover up what I caught them doing, and relative to a request for help that they affected to me. And I didn't know other names. I didn't know a former director of the FBI, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act was going to be involved. But think about it. When you bring up things like affirmative action or about woke culture, people trying to adapt, we have black people's whites of eyes to discern that and how the experts, the names of the people, the sciences, so to speak. For example, that's a phrase from the Old Testament. It says, only defend right here, where the names of the people, the sciences will come together, and the part that comes before it. And in other words, you guys are forcing natures of debates. These are people with some Jew syntax. There's a Paul Zano who sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. He has Jew syntax and federal evidence is crimes. Identity theft, fraud, slanders with people at Trinity College involved too, with people on my street with sequence shifts with them. Interstates. And these are people with Johnson and Wales and Rhode Island involved with the name Violet too, and with the names with the organized crime and their narratives and natures behind it, like with a Monacchio. Then they're planting evidence all sides of my house with these names: Violet, Monacchio, collusions against me with their educators too. I never had classes with them. You guys need to get the heck on paper too, and get the interbranch on paper too. And I want a response. There were more people involved with the sexual medical offenders of kids and rape threats and confessions tied to this. That I never had a word of conversation with him. He faked knowing me. In fact, he switched officers' names when one of the ones involved, a detective Samuda. He's involved with a girl that was reportedly abused by people from Central Connecticut State University. Men and women, including women judges at New Britain Superior Court, have roles with the sexual and medical offenders of kids, tied to a detective Samuda involved with the FBI director and foreign and domestic military families next to Central Connecticut State University, increasingly tied to a Burstein family with various natures of federal crimes and collusion slash S with former mayors and people from other countries and playing these games with their culture and speech and their fake motivations, because they're screening their motivations because they are and have been used remotely relative to them too. In the court next to the World Trade Center the day of the attack, these are people increasingly timed collusions with untimely deaths. Confessions on my street also confirmed on Facebook before they took that Facebook page too. People with confessions tied to body dumping spots years ago. Part of that was confirmed on Facebook, and the rest of it is recorded anyway. That's also a serial killer involved with crimes of a whole bunch of people from other countries, and people with the name Cintron from Puerto Rico, involved with a retired police chief Cintron, involved too with men and women that use the name Bobby with the intelligence community, involved at the corner of Elm Street in Rocky Hill and Elm Street in Weathersfield along Route 3, in conjunction to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices, is increasingly involved with a whole bunch of names of predicate acts at campuses and then pretending passions and emotions. As wire crime acts and methods of Weathersfield police, falsified police reports rolls with them, identity theft, fraud, slanders with them. Weathersfield Pizza have a Stephen Stocko and his educators recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they should not have hid without record. So they were influenced to off the campuses to collusion/S. And again, even the FBI director, the CIA is also involved too with the syntax and names involved. And people can't make that up, even if they made it up. They're worse than criminal incompetence is recorded too. Again, we have black people's rights of eyes. And we agree about things like hunger and thirst that they have forsaken. And we all know this. See, the polling locations are involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes and syntax rat traps. They cannot speak for or afford to be heard. Anyone with short words proper by the Constitution on a bridge. In other words, repentance. You guys have had self-value, abridged syntax of the names of the people of the sciences who came together through an as systems tactical terrier from the one that is the human species body, generated by that which is generating totally distinct species bodies, each one made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies and all group differences like male and female. It's generating that. What is not us nor them, but is all things anyway. And we are shown when we observe it further, we are shown that there are distinct parts of itself, nature itself, that comes with that are inseparable from the individual identity of value progression as itself that we can discern to an extent. In other words, that's what we are shown when we are shown birds have two eyes, fish have two eyes. They look similar to human. They're distinct, but they're non-distinct. And we are simultaneous, but also per that further distinct identity of simultaneous nature, the hyper-simultaneous, if you will, vaccines. So there's a Darth Vader, an officer who used the name Darth Vader, who's one of the ones involved with a whole bunch of other countries and people involved with the World Trade Center attack before and after it through other natures of organized crimes, including methods of them, like predicate acts with facts. There are wire crime acts and methods that involve like here, no, oh, I don't know, I just use the phone. And then they just change the fake what's actually digitally and recorded. They put fake phone transcripts. Weathersfield police even faked me being at the police station and speaking with them as a kid and now as an adult. And they have the Saudi Arabia involved with it. And the names that were involved with my Saudi ex that knew her before I did, like the names of Demoro, increasingly involved with co-defendants, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. There's a Dawn LaConch, too. I never had a word of conversation with a Dawn LaConch. She has federal evidences crimes with people on Church Street in Old Weathersfield who have roles with judges and prosecutors and overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and sexual medical offenders of kids, and including with overt criminal enterprises and private ones in the businesses and houses next to Harvard Hospital, collusion/S with the intelligence agencies there and the judges' family members. Multiple different natures of courts, too, tied to the same house/S and one tied to them, who run into hide lie progressions, put fake sides of issues while they're on top of that, they just put totally fake transcripts at the same time. They're incapable since founding of making a proper subject treatment. As otherwise, we would not have had left out how we have black people's right to life. We wouldn't have to beg to make short words about the World Trade Center attack unabridged. people faking and changing what we say, threatening us not to say anything, blocking making all this noise too. Get the heck on paper and off Route 3 with the people that with the fake ties to me. Guy Dinavelis will tell you that. In other words, a whole bunch of people tell you there's a probate court judge who is involved with multiple agencies and the courts with all kinds of drugs and medicines crimes, identity theft, fraud, slants, putting fake things in databases, fake ties and fake natures of ties between the kids. They got the guy Dinavelis and people all along Route 3 involved, like even with the Trantolo lawyers and their ad people involved with their ad placements, including judges involved with sexual, including male and white and black female judges involved with sexual and medical offenders through self-value collusion slash S pretending they have faith in people legitimately and or when they have faith in people legitimately because they also have relative delusions involved here. Let me show you how to respond to what was actually recorded too. There's an O'Neill family who has roles with Whiting Forensics and West Hartford campuses and kids, and their own kids in Wethersfield, campuses, where they have all kinds of wire crime acts and methods and organized crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, medicines crimes, drugs crimes, and pretending passions and emotions at the same time with the kids and adults of foreign countries, overt criminal enterprises and private ones not by mistake, need to self-value the same sequence shifts and relative delusions. In other words, we have to address how the psychiatry is criminally foreign wild tactically delusions, raw collusion slash S, where the experts have replaced too, what our founders left. They replaced the breaching method right from the communications of James Madison and of nature itself. That nature itself shows us. One of the things that those affronts on women, those affronts on the color of black, of pupils, that are affronts on the color of white eyes. In other words, that's a breaching method. All those crazy laws and affronts on everyone and difference at once, slash us at once, they were all sickly distinctly about a whole bunch of different things, but they were all not distinctly about a human factory nature breaching method that was entrenched before America's founders were born. And that was effectively preventing people free speech. Even when the only founder we know the name of, James Madison, once he was a president slash chief too, they declassified why and how they did not have free speech still. There was a breaching method entrenched, and it was measured and there were measured and maintained roles, not just by the internationally monitored conversations that had those roles, even with slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies. When people wouldn't have gotten away with so long pretending, oh, our founders owned slaves. In other words, oh no, I didn't. The defenses of our founders are collusion slash S. You guys are only supposed to defend James Madison as our founder. You guys were supposed to speak about the extortion of George Washington and about how it was worse and about how no one had free speech. Everyone had to hide their actual motivations too for roles with the American Revolution because everyone had to be checked because the breaching with already had an extent of collusion slash S. Everyone against themselves and everyone else. So there would be no nature of unity, no nature of independence capable of not being measured and maintained. It's right through the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, or the internationally monitored conversations, or the country's branch of the government. Supposed to discern and appreciate why and how there's a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Then and now, they still have other communicators, like across the country, it's discernible. They have other communicators than our founders left to have communicated about the founding plan and how and why. James Madison, the founders behind him, plural, had to force everyone to make up narratives about why they broke the rules and how they did it at the same time, even though they left it entrenched. Because they knew that a breaching method was going to come. So they gave people excuses. Oh, it's where we were fighting about a T-tax. It wasn't about a T-tax. There was a breaching method that only allowed roles with torture, extortion, and slavery. Nobody was safe. In other words, same thing had Native Americans against Native Americans because the whole ground is tactically denatured. The ocean. God knows what's in the ocean. The whole ocean. We are only one species. Earth's a special difference leaves of Hadith through us because we ignore. Nature shows us to discern the difference. Don't speak about peace without discerning the difference between peace and criminal insidious, since nature's of peace. We must learn this. We must have, but pretend we had it drilled into us, and we must drill out what is standing, replacing what our founders had communicated. They need to have things to pretend. They need to have they have the collusions or sexual medical offenders of kids for methods recorded, and they're pretending other. Oh, it's he's speaking because then they jump in with they have a gay person in there, or they have a this nationality, this religious themed. They have even Jewish themed. With the intelligence, with this game, it's clear as day. Has nothing to do with it. They just have their differences used exactly the way the breaching method assigned them to be used. Black pupils. A through Z are a bunch of sick, fake punks because they came through sick, fake punk campuses that were they child abused, they're brainwashed. We're going to clear it here. We have to use what our founders left to classify, who disbelieves. That in other words, this is what's recorded. The value of is sick, where they give decorate, where they glorify our founders as other than them being unknown or James Madison. We have to stop that from being allowed to be gotten away with. Campuses A through Z, sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, for the functions of a breaching method, have self-value collusion /S with narratives and natures, blaming other things, others, ourselves, for what our founders told us to blame on slavery, on the breaching method, like slavery. In other words, they're not ignoring that for the reasons they pretend, and we're going to address the delusions of the people of the sciences, including of the experts on psychiatry and the mind. Get the heck on paper too. Get the heck on paper. Get me off the paid conversation with this Leahy family too. Let's get them on paper, one name and sequence. Be a God. That's what I caught them doing.